through the camp at dawn. Bring what your willing heart puts on. Gold and blue, scarlet and fine spun.
There is a verse in the middle of Leviticus 19 that Jesus, Hillel, Akiva, Paul, James, and King Benjamin all treated as the gathering principle of the whole of covenant life. 6 words in Hebrew. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Welcome back to Come and Listen with me. I'm Ricky Black, aka Elder Eleazar, and today is day 6 of week 18. It's the final day of our reading for this week on our ongoing 2026 study of the Old Testament. And we are in Leviticus chapter 9 today, reading about the Holiness Code. Now, before we open our scriptures and begin, let's just take a moment to acknowledge our Father in heaven, give him thanks and gratitude for refusing to separate worship from justice, ritual from neighbor, and devotion from generosity. And as we read today, we should strive to receive his holiness as a single fabric woven through every part of our lives, and strive to walk through it in the week ahead. And do so keeping Jesus, our Redeemer and Savior, in our hearts and his name on our lips at all times. And with that, we do want to read with intention as opposed to just going through and checking off the boxes here. So a couple of questions to keep in mind as we move forward to help focus our attention into the scriptures today. So first, what picture of God's character emerges from the commands in this chapter, right? So Leviticus 19, it's going to keep repeating, I am the Lord after each instruction. And the question, it's there to help train us as we read, watch how the laws themselves reveal who God is, right? All those elements that he's asking of us, it's going to be a reflection of who we are to him. And then how does the chapter redefine what holiness looks like in your everyday life, right? Because this chapter moves the holiness out of the tabernacle and those sacred spaces out of those rituals and into everyday practices, into business, speech, relationships, justice, generosity, sexual ethics, neighborly love, right? So really pay attention to how it shifts from ritual to relational holiness that we're going to deal with here. And finally, which commands here challenge the way people normally treat each other, right? Because you notice there's going to be a series of no's, don't do this, and a series of you must do these. And God's not necessarily just giving them just because. There's reasons why it's being given. There's reasons why in society people might have some inclination to not follow these. So there's got to be a reason for it. So keep a lookout for all that and be thinking about that as we read through the scriptures. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and come read together. Again, we're starting off here in Leviticus chapter 19. We're going to start with verses 1 through 4. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say unto them, Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Ye shall fear every man his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Turn ye not unto idols, nor make to yourselves molten gods. I am the Lord your God. So, be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. That's the thesis of the entire chapter, and arguably the whole book of Leviticus, right? The basis of Israel's ethics is it's not some sort of utility, right? It's not that simple. And while it can provide it, it's really not about social harmony, right? And while, yes, it might be what's best for the community, that's not its entire purpose. It's all about imitation. The Lord is holy. So the covenant people are to be like him. And I love that because it just makes me think of Jesus later on in John, right? Where he's talking to the apostles, and at first he says, I and the Father are one. And then he tells them that, basically the apostles and all of his believers will be one in him, even as he and the Father are one. So there is a point of becoming like unto the Lord, unto the Father, unto God that's kind of gone through here, right? So this is what God is. So this is how we should become like him. And also immediately the chapter, it starts mixing categories, right? Honor your father and your mother. Keep my Sabbaths. Don't turn to idols. So we have family ethics, ritual observance, and theological loyalty. Those are 3 very different domains in 3 very short verses, but they're treated as one continuous instruction. Because note, the Lord spake those, all 3 came, and then he ends that little triplet with, I am the Lord your God. So the refusal to separate domains it's honestly kind of a structural genius that starts with this chapter, right? Every category we want to compartmentalize: religion, family life, work life, social life, anything, right? The Holiness Code refuses to compartmentalize those. There is one holiness, and it has many faces. There's only one holiness. So all these things are tied together. Let's move on to verses 5 through 8. And if ye offer a sacrifice of peace offerings unto the Lord, ye shall offer it at your own will. It shall be eaten the same day ye offer it, and on the morrow. And if aught remain until the third day, it shall be burnt in the fire. And if it be eaten at all on the third day, it is abominable, it shall not be accepted. Therefore, everyone that eateth it shall bear his iniquity, because he hath profaned the hallowed thing of the Lord, and the soul shall be cut off from among his people. So a peace offering, they're eaten communally, right? And there's very strict rules about the timing. So eat the same day as the next, but not on the third day. After the third day, the meat is unclean and must be burned. But it can't just be that, right? Like, he's not making this rule for other food. It's only the peace offering. So why this rule? Because it's not just about food safety. See, the peace offering, unlike the burnt offering, was designed to be shared, right? So the worshiper, his family, the priest, they ate the meat together. So the communal meal was part of the worship. And the time limit, it forces a sort of generosity. Like, you can't hoard the meat. You can't save it for yourself. You have to invite people in. You have to share it before it spoils. So the ritual itself, it shapes this sort of posture of an open table of immediate generosity, one that can extend beyond the immediate parties involved. It shows that these sorts of things affect everybody. So the leftovers, they don't belong to you. They belong to the fire. So you better be generous with them. Okay, let's go on to 9 verses 10. And when ye reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field, neither shalt thou gather the gleanings of thy harvest. And thou shalt not glean the vineyard, neither shalt thou gather every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and stranger. I am the Lord your God. So here, immediately after the verses about peace offerings, it comes one of the, well, it's a very beautiful law, right? Here in the Pentateuch. When you reap the harvest of your land, you don't wholly reap the corners of your field, right? You don't gather the gleanings. You don't strip the vineyard of every grape. You leave them for the poor and for the stranger. So notice the chapter's logic here. It moves from peace offering directly to gleaning law without skipping a beat. So worshiping and justice are sitting in the same paragraph, treated as the same activity. And this is the law that Boaz keeps when Ruth gleans in his fields. So Boaz is being a faithful Levitical farmer when he leaves grain in the corners and refuses to glean exhaustively, right? The whole story of Ruth depends on this verse being honored by a man that we never see at the temple. But his farming practice is shaped by this holiness code. So the chapter assumes that being a covenant farmer means having less efficient harvesting on purpose. And holiness costs something. It costs the corners of your field. It costs you the grapes you didn't pick. It costs you the bottom line dollar that could have been yours, but it goes to somebody else by design. And even in the modern day, like, I don't have a field, I don't have a farm, but I think about this verse every time that there's some charitable organization. I'm at the checkout. They're like, "Would you like to donate your change?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I should probably leave those corners and gleanings to the poor and the stranger." So I don't know if that's necessarily applied here, but it's definitely how I think about it in my own life. All right, so let's continue on here to 11 through 14. Ye shall not steal, neither deal falsely, neither lie one to another. And ye shall not swear by my name falsely, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not defraud thy neighbor, neither rob him. The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with thee all night until the morning. Thou shalt not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block to the blind, but shall fear thy God. I am the Lord. Okay. So don't steal, don't deal falsely, don't lie to one another, don't swear by my name falsely, right? Goes back to the nice little take the Lord's name in vain commandment. Don't defraud your neighbor, pay your workers on time, don't hold their wages overnight. But then we get to verse 14, because the others seem like really obvious, but like, don't curse the deaf and don't put a stumbling block before the blind. So we stop there and think, why does the chapter specifically name the deaf and the blind? Well, It's because they can't catch the offense, right? The deaf person doesn't hear the curse, and the blind person can't see that you put an obstacle there. They have no way to defend themselves, no way to call out the wrongdoer. So the chapter says, you shall fear thy God, the Lord, right? Because the Lord sees what they can't see, and he hears what they can't hear. He is the witness for those without their own witness. So holiness is not just refusing to harm those who can fight back. It's also refusing to take advantage of the imperfect, right? Those who are unaware, those who can't defend themselves. And that verse extends in principle to anyone whose situation makes them vulnerable to harm that they can't catch. The disabled, the young, the elderly, the mentally diminished, the grieving, the exhausted. So anyone who is not at full capacity to protect themselves. Not that you should go and attack people who are at full capacity. But the idea is that this grace, this justice, this community of holiness, it needs to extend to everybody regardless. So the Holiness Code says that vulnerability is precisely what calls you to fear of God, right? Because he's going to witness for them. You're going to have to account to him. All right, let's look at verses 15 through 16. Ye shall do no unrighteous in judgment. Thou shalt not respect a person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. Okay. So don't be unjust in your judgment, right? Don't favor the poor or favor the mighty. Judge them righteously. And notice that there is this sort of careful symmetry, right? The chapter doesn't say don't favor the rich, the way we might expect a justice to read, like particularly in the modern day. But it also says don't favor the poor. Again, it says in both, right? Justice, it's not partisan. The Lord wants the truth to be the verdict, regardless of which way our sympathies pull. And so we don't go up and down as a talebearer as well, right? The Hebrew word here is rachil, which means a slanderer, a peddler of malicious gossip. So don't be the person who carries information that damages people's reputations. Like, don't stand against the blood of your neighbor. Now, that's a strange phrase, probably meaning don't profit from their harm or stand by silently while they suffer. So justice in this chapter, it's not just about what happens in a court. It's about what gets said at the dinner table and in marketplaces, at the water cooler at work, right? Whispered to your friends. The integrity of the whole system, it depends on the integrity of the speech that surrounds it. Let's look at 17 to 18. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy poor, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. So don't hate your brother in your heart. So watch the location of the prohibition. Like, it's not don't act in hatred, which you shouldn't do, right? It's don't hate in your heart. That's much more difficult. You can't carry that around. I've heard far too many people say, I can think it for free, but I can't, say it or do it. Like, well, actually we're instructed that you don't get to think it for free. You need to work on not doing that. So the chapter reaches inside all the way to our inner life, the unspoken hatred and the unacted bits. It's still forbidden. And then you shall in any wise rebuke your neighbor. So the chapter pairs the prohibition of hatred with the obligation of honest correction. So if you see your brother sinning, the loving response isn't silence, right? It's this isn't the sort of niceness culture that can sometimes take over. The loving response is in fact a rebuke. It's the opposite of hating your brother, right? It's not avoiding him, right? So it's loving him enough to risk an honest word. And that can be very difficult these days. And then verse 18, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, right? V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. So there it is, the verse that every major figure in tradition reads as the gathering principle of covenant life. Now, Rabbi Hillel, he was asked to teach the whole Torah while standing on one foot. And he said, what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. The rest is commentary. Go and learn. That was it. That was his entire lesson, all of the Torah. And Akiva, he called this the great principle of the Torah. Jesus called it the second great commandment, like unto the first. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Now, Paul in Galatians 5 said that the law is fulfilled in that one word. And James called it the royal law. And then King Benjamin in Mosiah 2 said, when you are in the service of your fellow beings, you are only in the service of your God. So none of them, they invented the neighborly love concept, right? They were just all reading this same exact verse. All right, let's look at 19 through 22. Ye shall keep my statutes. Thou shalt not let thy cattle gender with a diverse kind. Thou shalt not sow thy field with mingled seeds, neither shall a garment mingled of linen and woolen come upon thee. And whosoever lieth carnally with a woman, that is a bondmaid, betrothed to a husband, and not at all redeemed, nor freedom given her, she shall be scourged. They shall not be put to death, because she was not free. And he shall bring his trespass offering unto the Lord, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, even a ram for a trespass offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him with the ram of the trespass offering before the Lord for his sin which he hath done, and the sin which he hath done shall be forgiven him. So this is a whole bunch of really interesting ones that I think a lot of people get confused about, that don't mix categories. Don't breed two kinds of cows. Don't plant two kinds of seeds. Don't wear garments with mixed materials. So these verses, I mean, honestly, they're very puzzling to modern readers. In fact, it's one that I see thrown around a lot by people who are antagonistic to faith. They do it out of confusion themselves. It's like, well, you're wearing, mixed fabrics, cotton and nylon. It's not what it's talking about here. So why does the Lord care about wool and linen woven together? Well, the best reading that I know is that these laws function as a daily reminder of holiness as separation. See, Israel's vocation in the world was to be distinct. They were a people set apart, a peculiar people, right? So the mixing prohibitions reinforce that calling at the most ordinary level. So every time you pick out clothing, every time you plant a field, every time you yoke an ox, you are reminded that the Lord has called you to live differently, to be, called to be separated, right? So the verses about the betrothed servant girl that follow, they're also difficult and require careful handling. So the text provides a means of restoration where modern law would simply punish people. So whatever else we make of these verses, they assume that even violations of marriage, in this case between a slave woman and a free man, are still subject to the structures of atonement and restoration, and the chapter's been describing all along. So a lot happening here, but still very, very kind of justice-oriented. All right, let's look at Leviticus 23 to 25. And when ye shall come into the land, and shall have planted all manner of trees for food, then ye shall count the fruit thereof as uncircumcised. 3 years shall it be as uncircumcised unto you, it shall not be eaten of. But in the 4th year all the fruit thereof shall be holy, to praise the Lord withal. And in the 5th year shall ye eat the fruit thereof, that it may yield unto you the increase thereof. I am the Lord your God. So when you plant fruit trees, count the first 3 years. Fruit forbidden, can't touch it. The 4th year, that fruit is given into the Lord in holy praise. And the 5th year, you can finally eat the fruit. That is a long-term discipline. Like a new farmer planting an orchard has to wait 5 years before personally consuming the produce. 3 is just watching and waiting. 1 is consecrating, and then the harvest belongs to him. But why is that? Right? It's because the land itself belongs to the Lord. So the first fruits are not yours. They are his. So holiness extends with your patience with his creation. And it's to your willingness to delay your own benefits so that the Lord can be honored first. That's a deep theology and deep philosophy for any of us who want those immediate returns. Again, I think it speaks to us really clearly in the modern day where everything is about us getting what we want in our immediate returns. So having patience and slowing down a little bit. That's what it's about, giving glory to God first, not to ourselves. So the covenant farmer, he plants a tree that he personally won't taste for 5 years, knowing that the first fruits go to the Lord and not to himself. It's a hard task. All right, let's look at 26 to 28. Ye shall not eat anything with the blood, neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe times. Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. Thou shalt not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord. I'm going to have to think about what they're saying about that cutting the corners of your beard thing. But no, I mean, let's just go through this, right? Don't eat anything with blood. Don't use enchantment or observe times. Don't round the corners of your heads and round the corners of your beards. Don't cut your flesh for the dead or print marks on yourselves. So many of these were a specific response to the Canaanite mourning rituals and divination practices that the Israelites would encounter once they entered the land. So the pagan cultures around them had physical, signs of grief and a very specific method of contacting the dead. The Holiness Code carves out a different way of grieving. And so the principle still applies. The covenant people grieve, but they don't grieve as those who have no hope. They do have hope. And the covenant people seek guidance, but they don't seek it from forbidden sources. They shouldn't. So the covenant people mark their bodies with the covenant itself. Circumcision, in the ancient context. Not with the marks of competing religious systems. And that's truly what it's about. He's preparing them as they're about to go into another place to be set apart from them, to not be led astray by them. Okay, to Leviticus 29:31. Do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore, lest the land fall to whoredom, and the land become full of wickedness. Ye shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. Regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Okay. Don't prostitute your daughter. Seems obvious. Keep my Sabbath, reverence my sanctuary. Don't turn to mediums or wizards. So if you notice the connection that the chapter is making here, right? Sexual exploitation, Sabbath, sanctuary reverence, and consultation with the dead. So these four look like unrelated topics. The chapter sees them as one. Each is a way that the covenant people can betray the holiness that they've been called to. Each represents the loss of something the Lord has set apart. A daughter's body, a day of rest, a sacred space, and the spiritual realm. Those are his domain that he has consecrated. So holiness is the discipline of recognizing what he has been set apart and refusing to violate it. So in your relationships, in your time, in your worship, in your own personal spiritual practice, keep them holy, keep them sacred, keep them kadosh. Don't let them be defiled by other things, by the outside world. Okay, the next one here. We're going to go to verse 32. And this, I don't know, I always laugh when I read this one. It's worded in a fun little way here. Thou shalt rise up before the hoary head and honor the face of the old man and fear thy God. I am the Lord. So rise up before the gray-haired person, right? Honor the face of the old man, fear thy God. So the chapter, it's just been verses on rebuking gossip, judging righteously, paying workers, loving thy neighbor. And it now adds, stand up when the elderly enter the room. Why is that? Well, it's because the elderly carry the memory of the covenant. Like their wrinkles are the record of years of faithfulness, of struggles that you didn't face, and of testimonies that you haven't yet earned. So the covenant community honors its elders, not because they are entertaining or convenient, but because their presence carries a good weight. And the verse closes with that same refrain. We keep hearing, fear thy God. Honoring the elderly is part of fearing the Lord. The two are intimately connected. And also, again, I kind of look at this like the brethren. When it's time for a new prophet to be called into the role, it's the one who's been serving in the role the longest. Because it's right there. They've had the most experience in dealing with these specific tasks, with being a special witness. No one else can say, well, back in my day before you, they carry the most experience with these sorts of things. And being reverent with them and giving them, honor is, right there with the Lord. Okay, 33 to 34. And the stranger sojourn with thee in your land, ye shall not vex him. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you. And thou shalt love him as thyself, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So right here, this is a very loaded passage, right? The stranger sojourns with you in your land, do not vex him. Okay. The stranger that dwells with you shall be as one born among you, and ye shall love him as yourself. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. So notice what the chapter just did there, right? Verse 18 said, love your neighbor as yourself. And 16 verses later, it says, love the stranger as yourself. So the two commandments are deliberately parallel. The Hebrew is even structured identically. And the reason given, it's not some sort of abstract ethics, right? It's memory. You were strangers in Egypt. You know what it cost to be on the outside. You felt that cruel whip, right? You remember what it felt like when no one cared whether you lived or died. So don't you do that to anyone else. Don't visit to others which you haven't visited upon yourself. And it's actually one of the most cited verses in the rabbinic tradition for the obligation to welcome the immigrant, the refugee, and the outsider. So the covenant community is not allowed to forget what it was. The memory of being foreign grounds the obligation to those who are currently foreign. All right, let's do 35 to 37. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, in meat yard, in weight, or in measure. Just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin shall ye have. I am the Lord your God, which brought ye out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe all my statutes and all my judgments to do them. I am the Lord. All right. So don't be unjust in your measurements. Just balances, just weights, just ephah, and a just hin shall ye have. So the chapter ends right here. It's all about honest commerce in our scales and honest measuring cups, honest weights at the marketplace. So think about the progression. The chapter opened with, be holy as the Lord is holy, the most exalted possible theological starting point. And it lands here in the scale at the grocery stall where a merchant might be tempted to short a customer by a half an ounce of grain. Looking at you, Walmart. Now that gradient is the genius of the chapter, right? Holiness is not just a temple thing. Holiness reaches all the way down to the scale. In other words, the minutia, the thing that we just do constantly in our day-to-day life that we don't really think about. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. So the God who demanded the cloud on Sinai also demands an honest measuring cup at your stall in the marketplace. And the chapter signs off with a refrain, I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. It's the same God who liberated you from injustice expects you not to perpetuate injustice on anyone else. So the Exodus is a moral obligation as much as it is a historical event. So that's all I got for you today for the reading. It does conclude our reading for the week as well. So one chapter, the Holiness Code, 37 verses, almost all of them imperative. And just summarizing it all, be holy as the Lord is holy, honor your parents, keep the Sabbath, don't glean the corners, pay your workers on time, don't curse the deaf or trip the blind, don't hate your brother in your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, honor the elderly, love the stranger, use honest weights and measures. And every section ends with the same refrain, I am the Lord. It's the basis of every commandment. It's the same. The Lord is who he is, and the covenant people are called to reflect him in every domain of their life. So now the genius of Leviticus 19 is that it refuses to give us the categories that we want, right? We want to separate the religious from the ethical, but the chapter doesn't let us. It puts the I am the Lord as a refrain after both ritual commands and social justice commands. So the God who demands the Sabbath also demands fair wages. The God who forbids idols also forbids putting a stumbling block before the blind. There is one holiness, and it maybe have many faces, but it is one holiness in all things. And the verse at the sort of center of all, love thy neighbor as thyself. It is read by every major figure in the tradition as a gathering principle. So again, that's Hillel, Akiva, Jesus, Paul, James, Benjamin. None of them invented it. They're just all kept referring back to that same verse because it was so important. Again, Mosiah 2:17 takes it the furthest. When Benjamin says, when you are in the service of your fellow beings, you are only in the service of your God. So there's no daylight between, our holy life and our regular life. It's all the same. To love God and to love the neighbor is the same activity, viewed just from two different angles. So what does this mean for you? Here's what I think this chapter has been asking of us all week, right? Where in your life have you separated worship from justice? Where have you been generous with God and stingy with neighbors, or attentive to a neighbor and cold towards God? So this chapter, it doesn't allow us to do either. Where are the corners of your field that you've been harvesting too efficiently? Where are you not leaving behind for someone who needs it? It might like not literal grain, but it might be time, it might be attention, it might be the hour at the end of the day when you're finally just sitting down for yourself. But maybe one day a week that hour belongs to, a neighbor. And who is the stranger that you're being asked to love as yourself this week? Probably someone specific if you think about it. Probably someone you've been avoiding or whose situation you've been quietly judging, right? So the chapter says that you were strangers once. Don't forget what that felt like. Let me know what your thoughts and insights are, right? Anything I may have missed or do you think I got wrong? Tell me in the comments. I honestly look forward to having a discussion and conversation. So that's week 18, the tabernacle built, the cloud descend, the altar at work, the 2 goats, the holiness code, and the high priest carrying holiness to the Lord on his forehead. The inscription that ran through the entire week, holiness to the Lord. Now, if you do want to go deeper into today's reading, the deep dive article is Love Thy Neighbor as Thyself. It's Leviticus 19:18 from Sinai through the Sermon on the Mount to Mosiah. Now that article and this week's scriptures, the study song that goes with it, Holiness to the Lord, they're linked in the description, so please check them out. I'm sure you're going to love them and you're going to get a lot out of it. And tomorrow was Sunday. So after this week of reading, you should have hopefully a lot to add to your discussion in Sunday school gospel doctrine classes. Also tomorrow, I will be posting my weekly preview for week 19 as we read through the book of Numbers. In addition, yes, you'll get a new song of the week. This one's called Rebel Not, Neither Fear. And it's going to be a break from some of the pop EDM and even world music of late. It's going to bring some good old rock and roll to the ears. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I know I do. So anyway, that's all I got. See you back here tomorrow. And until then, as always, I appreciate you all and thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time to come listen with me.
Holiness to the Lord, in the work of our days be adored. Take our ordinary into the sacred chord.